basic ideas about ourselves is, I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. My thoughts are my own. New evidence in neurobiology shows that we have mirror neurons, and these mirror neurons operate just like this. When we see somebody doing something or having an emotion, the very same neurons in our brains fire that would, if we were having that emotion, we were carrying out that action. So what happens is, to understand other people, to understand the world around us, basically we merge with them. We connect with them. And when you think about it, this means that our thoughts are a complicated mix of my actions and thoughts and yours. And so this becomes very messy to try to distinguish, well, what comes from me and what comes from you? And the answer is, it is a mix. You can't separate it out. We're all connected in a very, very fundamental way. You hear that thing where, we're all one. Everybody likes to say that. Yeah. But it's actually true. It's really hard to say this is where I end and where you begin. Nobody could tease out the difference between my thoughts and yours anymore. If we were standing in the room together and we were monitoring my brainwaves and yours, we'd find that we were mirroring each other all the time. We were blending into one, literally. Nature has a drive to wholeness, not competition. Nature's designed us to connect with each other and to cooperate with each other, and has designed animals like this, But we have created, particularly we in the West, have created this life where we're constantly in competition with each other, and we are, doing that at all costs, and we believe there isn't enough out there. We believe we've got to beat the other guy, and it becomes so inherent in our lives that it's a sickness, basically. And because of that, if you look at it, you look at what's going on in the corporate world, and you realize that this mindset is behind the raft of cheating that goes on in corporations. It's behind the raft of cheating that goes on in colleges. But, one area I know a lot about is the pharmaceutical industry because of my work with What Doctors Don't Tell You. And recently I came upon a statistic that blew my head off. It showed that and this was from medical literature, they showed that 3/4 of all the studies that are behind most drugs demonstrating, and supposedly demonstrating safety and effectiveness are written by PR agencies. And this is not yeah. Conspiracy idea. This is fact. So I was shocked by that. But
Hold on for a second, Lynn. We're going to take this quick break, and we're going to come right back with you. Lynn, let's go back to intention for just a moment. If 10 people are in a room, would they be more powerful to change an event than one person who is probably pretty good at this?
That's a really interesting question, George, and I don't have a definitive answer. What I can say, though, is that experience does seem to count. When we looked at that experiment with plants, I ran that 6 times with different organizations around the world. I ran it from Sydney, Australia, with a group of about 700. I ran it in Rhinebeck and in New York and South Carolina, Dallas, LA, and on the Internet. And I had different-sized audiences. In each case, we had an effect. But one time, we actually made the plants grow twice as large and twice as high. And in that case, I was working with an experienced group of healing touch professionals. And so in that, they were experienced intenders, and they were more effective. So I'm not sure it's super large mass, because we've had big effects with 100 people. We've had big effects with 700 people. I think it is, though, the supercharged thing of having a batch of people together. Now, let's say you compare that to a Qigong master. You're going to have a big effect with that Qigong master because that's a healing, that's an intention master, a real master of intention. But if you've got a group of people who are working really well together, as I say, we've seen very powerful effects with this group of 8 or 12 people because it's that connection, that little community that I think supercharges intention. Genes are turned on and off by everything in our lives, the diet we eat, the water we drink, the people we come into contact with. All of those things affect a little quartet of atoms that sit above the gene and decide whether or not to turn it on and off. And so in a sense, we are the connection between ourselves and our environment. We are not an individual thing. We're a summation of our experience. The rowing teams are really interesting because the Oxford rowing teams, they did a study looking at what happens when you row by yourself versus when you row in a group. And they found that rowing in the group raised their pain threshold far more than rowing alone. So that has big implications. It shows, again, when we fire together and wire together, we raise our own game. Much of what I talk about in this book has to do with reestablishing our communities. And when you look at America today, you see that we are fragmenting so much. We're so polarized, and we're so hunkered down in our own spaces without connecting to people in our neighborhood, in our offices, in our community. And, this more and more is becoming toxic, not only to the country, but to us individually. We were never made to be like that. You can see it. Nature is, is connecting us. Now, with the rugby team, it's all about that same idea. There was a real interesting study called the Robbers Cave experiment that really says it all. This study was done in the 50s, and it's been one of the most beloved studies of psychology of all time. It was a bunch of boys that were sent to a camp for a summer, and they sent them in separate buses. They told them to call themselves different names, so they had the Rattlers and the Eagles, and they created situations where they were highly competitive. They stayed in separate living quarters. They were playing very competitive games against each other. They had their own flags, their own identity, and the camp counselors were a bunch of psychologists in disguise. And they got things so competitive that the kids started really killing each other. They were getting into fights. They hated each other. So then the psychologists then orchestrated another thing. They started creating crises in the camp that could only be solved by the boys working together as a team. Like they put a boulder in the water tank so they couldn't get water, so they had to lift the boulder together. And they did this over and over again. And lo and behold, the boys started coming together as one. They became really good friends. They voted to travel together back home. They bought ice creams for each other, and they became this unit. What we think of as coming together is connecting with people who are just like us. We think that's friendship. We think that's coming together. And more we're looking for that in our neighborhoods, etc. Just getting together a giant group of eyes, people just like me. But we are not made to do that. We're made to connect with everybody with whom we come in contact with, even the people who are not like us. And so the more and more we do that, the more and more we define ourselves as different, and we fragment more and more, the more we get into trouble. Studies, and we find this in the small groups and large, is that people, after they've done this kind of group intention, feel more love for all of their relationships, but particularly more loving towards strangers. And I found this in the small groups, and when I've been looking at community with my newest work, the idea that when we connect together for a common purpose, whether it's sending intention or doing something together, people begin to feel more loving towards people who are not like them or people who are absolute strangers. And as I say, I've been surveying this after we do experiments and when I work with small groups, and it seems to pan out every time. For health, the thing that protects people from depression, from strokes, from all sorts of things, maybe to some extent diet, but the most important thing is relationships and connection.
Well,
I hope that we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater when we talk about individuals. You can have an individual without a group. You can't have a group without an individual. And in that sense, the individual is axiomatic. And I think that we're part of a whole. But both those words matter. You know, we are each a part.
You know, I'm not putting down the whole idea of individuals or accomplishment. What I mean is we've gone too far. So what individuals do matter, but it's just a change of perspective of seeing yourself and your actions and how they impact on other people, and seeing when you're dealing with other people, being able to take a more aerial perspective. So you're not just saying it's just, you know, my way or the highway kind of thing. You know, it's seeing yourself as a bigger whole. And when you take that perspective, then you can deal with differences, individual differences, and find they don't matter so much. You know, I've been fascinated to look at a situation that happened with the pro-life and pro-choice people in Boston. After there were some shootings, both groups decided to get together. You know, some people were shot in Planned Parenthood. They thought things had gone too far. They got together. They met in secret. They talked honestly about their views. And at the end of 2 years, they had a press conference about it because they had begun to watch each other's backs, even though they didn't agree. So at the press conference, the reporter said to them, "So who won the debate?" And they said, "Well, no one. We became more entrenched in the things that we believe in." The pro-choice people really were convinced of what they believed in, the pro-life people. So they said, "Well, so you lost, so it was a failure." And they said, "Oh, no. We watch each other's children now. We go out and party together. We love each other." So in that situation where they were able to speak with each other more deeply, they found connections. They found common ground. They moved beyond differences. They kept their individual views. They maintained their individualism, but they connected through the space between, and they became friends.